Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician and an intimate marriage expert, and I specialize in showing couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I've been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how now. Let's dive in. In today's episode, I'm going to introduce you to one of the most important people in the world for me. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you're obviously familiar with my voice. If this is the first time you're listening, welcome. Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast family. If you've been listening for a while, not only have you heard my voice, but you've probably heard my husband's voice. He's joined me on 2 episodes already. And you've also heard my oldest child's voice, my daughter, Josephine, because she and I recorded a podcast which dropped on her 25th birthday in September. Now, Josephine is the oldest of 4, and next comes 3 boys who are aged 22, 16, and 9. And my 9-year-old Matthew, he's in a kind of a unique, fantastic situation because he's a lot younger than the next oldest siblings. So in some ways, he's an only child because everyone else is so much older. And in other ways, he is absolutely the youngest of 4 and one of 6 at the dining room table. So I interviewed him mostly because he asked if he could be interviewed. He wanted to participate in what I'm doing. He knows about the podcast. Every now and then he hears me listening to parts of it when I want to check how the editing came out and make sure it's going to be a good listening experience for you. And so he told me he wanted me to interview him. So I did. And you're about to listen to that conversation. I just want to explain a few things first. One is that he references having a much older sister whom he didn't really know. And that's because Josephine left for college when he was 3.5 years old. So she definitely felt like she knew him, but he doesn't have memories from that time. And so during the pandemic, it really provided a beautiful opportunity when she came back home to live with us for, about 8 months, because then he really got to enjoy being siblings with her. I don't really think anything else calls for an explanation except to say that I've never asked him the questions that I asked. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't planned, it wasn't prepared, and he's never listened to a whole episode. So you just get to listen in on a very frank, genuine conversation between me and my 9-year-old. And the one other thing I want to say before we transition to that conversation is I'm sharing it with you on purpose. I'm sharing it with you because so many of the conversations on the podcast are about your experience and what's going on between you and your partner. And those conversations are going to continue. They are incredibly important. And what's going on within you and between you and your partner, it is having a nonstop impact on your children. And this is an opportunity for you to hear what that experience is like for a child, because it's a conversation we rarely have with our children unless it's later when they're adults and then the impressions aren't as fresh or raw. So buckle up for a really sweet, unique conversation that I'm super happy to share with you. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Hi.
How old are you, sweetheart?
9.
And what would you like people to know about you before we continue with this conversation?
That I love playing baseball, and I'm usually the best on the team.
Okay. Well, as it is, that happens to be true. So, how do you feel about being the youngest child in our family?
Sometimes it's amazing, sometimes I really don't like it. And so I'd say it's fun, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way.
Okay. Well, what's amazing about it?
Well, I'm the youngest, so I get all the attention. And then whenever I do something bad, then I don't get punished because I'm the youngest. And it's usually they say, "Hey, why did you make him do this?"
Okay. And what's bad about it?
Well, being the youngest is sometimes hard because, everyone's bigger than you. So they can kind of get in fights with you and they always win, which is the problem.
I see. Well, how often do you get in fights? I actually was surprised to hear that answer.
Well, not that much anymore, but before we got in fights a lot. But anyway, games are hard because they always win too.
Okay, yeah, I can understand that. Well, what would you say makes the Stockwell family?
Well, everyone else, they always have candy and stuff, which makes me different. Like, I remember one person on the baseball team, his name is Julian, and his dad made him have gum, but he didn't like gum. So that's just kind of funny to me.
Okay. So our family is unique because we don't do candy. Any other things that are unique?
Well, we homeschool, which is unique. And so I have a bunch of free time, and I have to think, hey, I want to play with someone. Wait, are they out of school yet?
Okay, that is funny. And you told me a story once how when I had taken you to the skate park, I think this was about a year ago, one of your friends there said, "Are your parents divorced?" And you said, "No." You laughed. You said, "It's the opposite." Do you remember that story?
Yes.
What did you mean? It's the opposite.
Well, I could see that most of them, their parents were divorced, and it would be hard to explain how our family is. So I just said, we're clearly not divorced, and we're nowhere near that.
Okay. And even though it's hard to explain, you're pretty good at explaining things. So say more.
Well, they kind of have a bunch of sleepovers, and their parents, I think, get in fights a lot. And so it's just a very different feeling from my family. And I feel like they couldn't really understand how having a good mom and dad relationship really does.
Okay. Well, can you say now to me what having a good mom and relationship really does?
Well, you're kind of closer to everyone, and you don't have as many you're in a better mood most of the time, kind of, because your parents are usually finding their way together and trying to help you while also helping other people and letting you learn.
Okay. And how does that feel to you?
It feels really good sometimes, and it feels kind of not so good sometimes.
Tell me about it not feeling good sometimes.
Well, sometimes there's one thing that mom believes and another thing which dad doesn't believe. And so they get in arguments. And I really don't like when there's bad energy around. So that does not feel good.
What's something that we disagree about? Can you think of an example? Because actually, when I'm asking you this now, I can't think of a time really recent this month, I can't think of the last time when we had a disagreement like that, but you might remember it more.
Well, to tell the truth, I think the one I'm remembering was like a year ago or something. I forget what it was about, but I just remember it was really horrible being.
I see. Well, in my experience, you're actually extremely sensitive. So we're not yelling at one another or speaking badly, but just any kind of tension, you're happy for it to finish quickly. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Do you know what about that tension is so uncomfortable for you?
Well, it's kind of like I want things to be right, and I don't. And so when there's like an argument, well, it feels to me, then I feel like I kind of don't want to be there, and it just makes me feel worse myself, even if it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, well, it always has nothing to do with you. And sometimes it's not anything that Daddy and I would consider a fight, but any kind of tension you really are sensitive to. Okay, so it's been a year. So let's talk about more recent times. You've done a very good job describing what's uncomfortable when there's tension between us. How would you describe the feeling most of the time or the rest of the time?
Well, I feel like my parents, whenever I need something, usually can help me. And like they kind of like, hey, I can do my work while you're with me, or the other way around. And so that way I get help when I need it. But I also need to learn how to be by myself. And so sometimes I have to be by myself.
Okay. And I have two more questions. What's it like having siblings who are old enough to be in graduate school while you're in fourth grade?
Well, Josephine, who, I don't think I've ever had her home except like a year ago for actually a long time. It was all for visits. And so that really helped me be able to connect with her. And before, basically, like my sister, yay, she's home, but I don't really know much about you.
So that was a gift of the pandemic.
Yes.
Okay. My second question is, since many of the people who are going to listen to this conversation are parents with children or will be parents with children, what advice do you have to them so that their children have a wonderful time growing up?
To have them challenged, because you need to push them. Most children won't really just do stuff by themselves. So you need to push them, but not push them too hard, and have them connect with everyone, but also have them be by themselves sometimes.
Thank you. Thank you for answering these questions. You know, one of the things that I ask all of my guests is, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to whomever they're married to? Obviously, you're not married. I see you smiling there. And you are my son, Daddy's son, and your sibling's brother. What have you learned about yourself as a result of being our son and their brother?
That everyone is kind of different, and so you can't really say like this will help you. You kind of have to be like, what's the right thing for you?
Thank you so much for coming to this interview.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Intimate Marriage Podcast. For more information about Alexandra, her book, and her coaching services, go to theintimatemarriagepodcast.com.